sister wore a wedding dress to my grandmother's funeral. My aunt claimed it was disrespectful, and my uncle laughed. See how we transformed scandal into strength. I never thought I'd see a wedding dress at my grandmother's funeral. My name's Clara Reynolds. I'm 28, and I live in Savannah, Georgia. The humid June air clung to my skin as I approached the wrought iron gates of Evergreen Memorial, heart hammering in my chest. Around me, mourners in black suits and navy dresses exchanged hushed condolences, faces solemn. But as I neared the entrance, a flash of ivory stopped me cold. There was Elise, my younger sister, stepping out of the car in a pristine lace gown, the kind you only see in bridal magazines. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few heads snapped toward us, some lips curled in confusion, others lowered in disapproval. I wanted to shout at her to change, to at least throw on a black shawl, but my legs felt rooted. Elise offered me a trembling smile, half defiance, half apology, and I, torn between pride and shame, bolted forward. "Clara," she whispered as I reached her, voice tight. Her dress fluttered around her like the wings of a startled swan. Memories crashed into me. 6 months ago at the rose-bedecked chapel, when Elise had aborted her wedding mid-ceremony, ring tossed aside, fiancé frozen in shock, guests erupting in whispers. The internet had devoured that scandal faster than wildfire, leaving her face splashed across every gossip site. I wanted to protect her, to shield our family's name. Instead, we retreated into silence. Now, standing before the ornate gates, I realized I still didn't know what drove her to this. Was it some desperate plea for attention? A final rebuke of the world that laughed at her? My pulse throbbed louder than the church bell tolling behind us. A hush fell as Pastor Whitman stepped onto the low platform. He cleared his throat, scanning the sea of black, then paused as his eyes landed on Elise's dress. His next words tremored as if he'd lost his place in the pulpit. I glanced at Elise's pale shoulders, slick with sweat. She fought back tears, each one catching the afternoon sun like a shard of glass. Morning white, I thought, the irony cut me sharper than any eulogy could. "Elise," I murmured, but she only gave me that same fragile smile, as if she'd rehearsed some secret answer in her mind. The pastor opened his book, voice quavering. "We gather here to celebrate the life of Margaret Reynolds." But I couldn't hear another word. All I could think was, why now? Why this dress? And then, from beneath her veil, Elise lifted her chin, and something in her eyes told me this funeral was about to change everything. I felt the chapel's air grow colder the moment we stepped inside. Rows of pews overflowed with black draped bodies, and the scent of lilies hung heavy as a warning. Every pair of eyes in the room flicked toward Elise's dress. Whispers rose like wind through dry grass. I slipped into a seat beside her, heart thundering, and gripped her hand so tight my knuckles went white. Behind us, Mrs. Whittaker, the neighbor with perfect hair and sharper opinions, exhaled a long, disapproving sigh. "Bridal white at a funeral," she muttered to her sister, voice pitched low but venomous. I clenched my jaw, willing myself not to turn around. My mind drifted back 6 months, to that fateful June afternoon when Elise had first tried on this dress. She stood before the mirror, eyes bright, dreams pouring from her like sunlight through stained glass. Then came the scandal, her fiancé's glare, the ring skidding to the floor, the bridal cocal echoing in that empty chapel. Rumors had spread like wildfire. Attention seeker, social media stunt, broken inside. Even now, I could still taste the metallic sting of shame. "Elise," I whispered, voice low enough I hoped only she could hear. She pressed her thumb against mine, eyes fixed on the closed coffin draped in white roses. "I'm right here," I added. A low murmur swept the room as the pastor cleared his throat, but then his voice cracked. "Let us bow our heads." He paused, glancing at Elise, then inhaled so hard his collar rustled. I squeezed Elise's hand, but she didn't meet my gaze. Her shoulders trembled, the lace at her neckline fluttering like the wings of a wounded bird. Soft sobs rose from the front pew, my aunt sobbing for her mother, and the hush broken by the rustle of silk. Across the aisle, my cousin Darren leaned close to his wife and whispered, "Is that—" His words trailed off, but I heard enough. I felt anger flare up inside me, anger at those eyes that judged, that whispered, that refused to believe grief could look like anything other than black. I swallowed hard, fighting the urge to stand and shout, to defend Elise from every cruel glance. But what could I say? That this dress carried her hopes, her heartbreak, and now her final act of mourning. That black felt hollow as though it swallowed her whole. The words lodged in my throat. Behind the pulpit, the pastor's voice faltered again. "Your grandmother taught us kindness, compassion." His gaze flicked to Elise once more, then slipped back to the pages in front of him. I watched Elise's jaw clamp shut, as if she were swallowing bitter medicine. A distant memory surfaced. Elise at 16, twirling in our grandmother's rose garden, daring me to spin faster. Her laughter had been so free. Now she sat rigid, every fiber of her trembling. I leaned closer, voice tight with emotion. "You don't have to do this alone." Her eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw fear, defiance, and something fragile, almost hope. But before I could speak again, the pastor's hand lifted, turning the page. The chapel hummed with the rustle of paper and the shuffle of feet. "Elise," I started, but the moment slipped away as he began the eulogy anew, voice steady now but hollow. I sank back into the pew, heart pounding. Every whispered judgment pressed against me like physical weight. I had to decide. Would I let the silence swallow us both, or would I find my voice and protect her dignity? Lilies trembled in the vase beside the pulpit, petals white as Elise's gown, beautiful, vulnerable, and on the brink of falling. And I realized with a start that I was the only one who could catch them before they hit the floor. What would I do next? I caught up to Elise just as the last mourners drifted away, their soft footsteps stirring rose petals across the grass. "Elise," I demanded, voice low but shaking, "what were you thinking?" She stood beside the fresh mound of earth, ivory lace dusted with pink petals, a figure both radiant and raw. Her breath came in short, tremulous bursts. I could taste my anger on the breeze, part protectiveness, part frustration. Was this a cry for attention? I spat, my words rough like gravel, or some grand statement about grief? Lisa's gaze dropped to the ground. She traced the outline of a petal with her toe, as if it might tell her what to say. When she looked up, her eyes were red, a storm of sorrow and defiance. "I wore it for Grandma," she whispered. Her voice cracked, and I felt a stab of guilt. "And for what I lost." "What you lost?" I echoed, arms folding across my chest. "Your fiancé walked away 6 months ago, you." She interrupted me with a shuddering breath. Don't pretend it's only about him." A silence stretched between us, heavy as the coffin we'd left behind. I studied her. That dress wasn't just fabric, it was a map of her heart, stitched with every hope and heartbreak she'd carried since her engagement imploded. "I know people think I'm crazy," she said, voice steadier now, but black felt hollow, as if wearing it would swallow me whole. She glanced at the mound before us. "When I lost Grandma, I felt like losing both of them. I was already grieving love. I didn't want to deny one grief because of the other." My chest tightened. I'd never heard her admit her pain so plainly. In my mind, I saw her last wedding rehearsal. Bright laughter, white roses, vows dangling in the air like fragile promises. And then the gavel of reality, rejection, whispers shame. "You were standing in white at her funeral," I said softly, and everyone stared. Lise nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks, each one a glistening confession. Because white used to mean hope. I wanted to reclaim it, make white mean love and loss together, not just celebration. I lowered my guard. The hurt and anger melted into something fiercer, compassion. "I get that," I murmured, reaching for her hand. I just didn't know how to help." Her lips curved in a shaky half-smile. "I needed you to stand by me, Clara, even when it made no sense." I blinked back tears. "You don't have to explain every choice to me," I said. "I just have to be here." Breeze picked up, scattering petals over the grass like whispered blessings. Elise bent and scooped one into her palm, pressing it against her heart. "Promise me," she said, voice firm. "Promise you won't let me face any of this alone." I squeezed her hand, feeling the fragile strength in her palm. "I promise." She lifted her face to the sky, and for the first time since we arrived, she seemed unburdened, if only a little. Together, we stood beside the grave, two sisters bound by loss and love, knowing the road ahead would be rocky. But at least now we faced it side by side. And as the chapel's doors closed behind us, their echo felt less like an ending, and more like the first step toward something neither of us could predict. What would tomorrow bring for us, dressed in grief yet determined to heal? The wake felt like walking into a storm. The reception hall at Marigold's banquet center was crowded with chatter and clinking china. Black suits and somber dresses brushed past tables heavy with casseroles and floral centerpieces. I followed Elise through the throng, her train of lace dragging over the carpet as curious eyes tracked our every step. Aunt Marlene stood by the buffet, arms crossed over her chest, her lips pinched into a thin line as we approached. "Elise," she said, voice tight, "you know this is disrespectful, don't you?" Lise paused mid-step, shoulders trembling. "I'm honoring Grandma," she said quietly. "Wearing a wedding dress," Aunt Marlene's words sliced the air. "This isn't some fashion statement." Before Elise could respond, Uncle Joel sidled up, wine glass in hand. His grin was more sneer than smile. "Attention seeker," he muttered loud enough for half the room to hear. "Don't you have enough drama already?" A collective gasp went up, and a few distant cousins exchanged pointed glances. I felt heat rise in my cheeks and slammed a hand against the table to steady myself. "Lise doesn't owe you explanations," I said, voice low but fierce. "She's grieving however she needs to." Marlene's eyes narrowed. "Clara, don't encourage her. This is wrong." I clenched my jaw. What's wrong is judging her grief. Heat flared in the room. A circle of relatives formed around us, whispers humming like angry bees. I wanted to rip the lights down and shatter their polished glasses, but instead I grabbed Elise's hand. "Come on," I hissed. We slipped through the crowd, hearts pounding. In the kitchen, the air smelled of coffee and grease. Aunts and cousins were nowhere in sight, only the quiet hum of the refrigerator. I guided Elise to a small table where 2 paper cups waited, half filled with stale coffee. Elise sank into a chair, pulling the lace skirt aside. She rubbed at her temples, eyes distant. "I thought I could handle it," she said, voice low. "But their whispers, it's like they see me as a sideshow." I poured coffee into her cup, hands trembling. "They're afraid," I said. "Afraid of anything that breaks their rules." She took a sip, bracing herself on the rim of the table. "You know, Grandma always let me be me. She told me white was about beginnings and endings. She said love and loss can share the same color." I remembered that afternoon in her sunroom, Grandma sitting in her rocking chair, knitting needles clicking like a heartbeat. "I miss her so much," I whispered. Lise looked at me, eyes soft. "Me too." For a moment, we were 2 little girls again, wrapping ourselves in my grandmother's quilt, whispering secrets between tea-stained saucers. I saw her hand on mine, warm and steady, reminding us that grief doesn't have a rule book. "I'm sorry," I said, reaching across the table. "I should have spoken up sooner." She shook her head. "You were figuring it out like me." I watched her lift the coffee to her lips again, noticing the way the lace caught on the edge of the cup. Fragile, yes, but still holding together. "We'll get through this," I promised. "Together." She gave me a small smile, the kind that carried old dreams and new resolve. "Together," she echoed. Footsteps sounded outside the kitchen door. I felt a surge of protectiveness, ready to face any cousin or aunt who dared intrude. But when the door swung open, it wasn't family. It was Mrs. Whittaker, her expression unreadable. She paused at the threshold, glancing between us, then gave a slow nod. I'm sorry," she said, voice softer than before. "I didn't understand." I blinked. Elise's jaw dropped. Mrs. Whittaker stepped inside and placed a gentle hand on Elise's shoulder. "Your grandmother would have been proud." And in that unexpected moment, amid the kitchen's hum and the hum of our own heartbeat, we found a sliver of hope. Because today, the family's fractures were wide. But in this cramped corner, with stale coffee and shared memories, 2 sisters stood united, and even the hardest hearts could begin to soften. What new cracks would heal tomorrow? Only time would tell. I didn't know how badly I needed sleep, until I found Elise staring at the dress. The guest room was cloaked in moonlight, the wedding gown hanging like a silent ghost against the pale wall. Its lace bodice shimmered in the soft glow, and I felt a pang in my chest. This dress had become our battleground. "Elise," I said, voice trembling as I stepped inside. She didn't turn, fingers brushing the satin train. "We have to take it off before anyone sees the photos online." She sighed, shoulders stiffening. "They've already seen it, Clara. It's everywhere." I closed my eyes, imagining the flashing cameras in the village square, the mocking comments scrolling on my phone. "You know what people will say, funeral stunt, desperate." Lisa's laugh was brittle. "Let them say what they want." My heart twisted. This isn't just a dress anymore, it's a story they'll twist into gossip. We have to be careful. She whirled around, eyes flashing white in the moonlit room. "Careful, is that all you ever think about, what people think?" I bristled. "I think about keeping you safe. I think about our family's reputation." Her shoulders hunched as if I'd struck her. "Reputation," she spat. "You care more about what strangers think than how I feel." Anger burned through me. "How do you expect me to feel, watching you parade this dress around like it's a trophy?" Lisa's face crumpled. "It's not a trophy, Clara." She backed away toward the window. "It's all I have left." I took a step closer, voice softer now. "You have me. You have family. You don't need this dress to prove your grief." Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't get it. You never get it." Her words cut deeper than any rumor. "You're scared of standing out. I'm tired of hiding." Her confession hung between us, raw and trembling. I swallowed hard. "I'm not hiding," I said quietly. I just want you to be okay." Lise shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You'll never understand feeling unseen." Without another word, she slipped past me and fled into the night. I froze for a heartbeat, then raced after her, calling her name. The cool night air hit me as I burst through the back door into the garden. Shadows danced beneath the oak tree at the edge of the lawn. "Lise," I cried, voice echoing. The moon carved silver paths through the grass, and there she was, kneeling, shoulders shaking in sobs. I dropped to my knees beside her, heart pounding. She bent forward, hands clenching at her skirt, tears soaking the fabric. "I'm so tired, Clara," she gasped. "Tired of being judged, tired of feeling like I don't belong anywhere." I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close. Her tears soaked my sleeve as she trembled against me. "You do belong," I whispered, voice thick. "You belong with me, with our family, with Grandma's memories." She lifted her head, eyes shining through her tears. "But I feel so lost without her." I held her tighter, pressing my cheek to her damp hair. "I know," my voice cracked. "I miss her too, but you're not alone." A gust of wind rustled the oak's branches, scattering petals from the climbing rose across the grass. We sat in silence, two silhouettes beneath the tree, bound together by grief and love. Finally, I pulled back just enough to look at her face. "Whatever comes next," I said, voice firm, "we face it together." Lise sniffed, a fragile half-smile breaking through. "Together," she echoed. I helped her to her feet, brushing petals from her gown. As we walked back toward the house, I realized that tonight's storm had cracked us open, but somehow we were stronger for it. And as the old oak stood guard behind us, I whispered into the night, "No more running." But even as I spoke, a tremor of doubt curled in my chest, because tomorrow the world would wake and the eyes judging us would be waiting. I stepped onto the cracked pavement of Main Street just as the first news van rolled in, its satellite dish unfolding like a metal flower. "Clara Reynolds," a reporter called, microphone extended. Around us, the village square buzzed with cameras, tripods, and curious onlookers. At the center stood Elise, her wedding dress pristine despite the early morning dew, and behind her the fresh headline painted across a banner, "Bridal gown at funeral sparks outrage." My pulse hammered. I'd imagined a dozen ways this morning could go, some awful, some hopeful, but I never thought I'd be facing a live broadcast in my grandmother's honor. "Elise," I murmured, slipping onto the pavement beside her. Her shoulders trembled, but her chin was up, eyes bright in the rising sun. The reporter cleared her throat. "Ms. Reynolds, your wedding dress has become the talk of the internet overnight. What message are you hoping to send today?" For a moment, silence fell. The hum of viewers tuning in crackled through my head. Then Elise took a breath, and I felt a surge of pride. "This," she said, voice steady though soft, "is not a stunt." She laid a gentle hand on the lace at her collarbone. "It's a dress of love, loss, and resilience. My grandmother loved white roses. She said they carried both beginnings and endings. Today, I'm honoring her life and the love I thought was lost." Murmur rippled through the crew. The camera lens swung to me. I swallowed and stepped forward. "I'm Clara Reynolds," I said, voice firm. "My sister isn't seeking attention, she's reclaiming her grief. We've both felt judged, silenced by whispers and stares. But grief doesn't fit into black or white. It lives somewhere in between." The reporter nodded, eyes softening. "And what do you want people to take away?" I glanced at Elise, her dress glowing in the dawn light, her teardrops catching the sun like tiny prisms. "Compassion," I said. "Let's give each other space to grieve however we need. Let's choose empathy over judgment." One of the cameramen lowered his camera, and I felt a shift in the air, something electric, hopeful. Questions followed, about viral comments turning from ridicule to support, about a small online fundraiser Elsa started to collect donated gowns for grieving brides. Elise answered each with calm sincerity, her voice faltering only once before she steadied it with a soft laugh. After the cameras left, we lingered under the oak tree at the square's edge. The television truck's lights winked in the distance, and my phone buzzed with notifications, messages from strangers thanking Elise for her courage, tweets calling for kindness. "Elise," I said, voice barely above a whisper, "you changed the narrative." She smiled, brushing a strand of hair off her forehead. "We changed it," she corrected, looping her arm through mine. I looked back at the empty square and imagined it filled with people who'd once scoffed. Now, they would think twice before judging. A small group of villagers approached, holding bouquets of white roses and cards. "Thank you," one woman said, voice warm, "for showing us what true mourning looks like." Lise accepted the roses with tears in her eyes, and this time, they weren't tears of shame. They were tears of relief. As we walked home, side by side, I realized our story was no longer about scandal. It was about two sisters who dared to grieve out loud and invited the world to listen. But even as hope blossomed around us, I felt a flicker of unease, because viral stories can change again in an instant, and tomorrow we might face a new storm. Would our words hold fast, or would we be swept away once more? Messages pinged on my phone before the sun had fully risen. "Thank you for your courage. You've given me hope to grieve differently. I wore black for my cousin's funeral, now I wish I'd worn white." I read them aloud to Elise as we sat on the porch, the wedding dress folded beside us like a fragile promise. She laughed through tears at a tweet from an old college roommate, someone we hadn't spoken to in years, apologizing for never understanding her pain. My heart warmed when a notification popped up from an unfamiliar number, her ex-fiancé. His message was simple: "I'm sorry I wasn't there for you. You deserved better. Can we talk?" Lisa's fingers trembled as she showed me. I reached over, brushing away her tears. "You see," I whispered, "you're not alone." That afternoon, I flipped through the local paper, the Savannah Chronicle, and there, in a full-page spread, was our story. Beneath my sister's determined smile, the headline read, "Bride of Loss Sparks Movement of Compassion." A small charity called Hearts in Transition had already reached out, asking to feature Elise in their next grief support campaign. We spent the afternoon on a video call with their director, mapping out a photo fundraiser. Elise would model the dress against different backdrops, The rose garden where Grandma taught her to twirl, the chapel steps where her vows went unspoken, even Evergreen's iron gates. Each image would carry a brief message of resilience. As evening settled, Elise carefully slipped the gown back on. I watched her in the living room mirror, smoothing a stray lock of hair from her face. The lace glowed softly in the lamplight, and for a moment she looked like the hopeful bride she'd once been. Only now her smile held a quiet strength. We posed ourselves outside beneath the oak tree, camera on a tripod. I called out gentle directions, tilt your chin, breathe, and captured her against the sunset sky. With each click, I saw her pain transform into purpose. Afterwards, we sat cross-legged on the grass, reviewing the shots. "This," Elise said, voice bright, "is exactly what I wanted." I nodded. "They'll resonate. Someone out there needs to see you here." We spent the night drafting plans for the pop-up exhibit. Rows of white gowns tinted by embroidered stories, installations of lace draped over broken mirrors, a guest book for visitors to share their own journeys. We brainstormed a title, White for Every Goodbye. Before bed, I scrolled through more messages. A former neighbor I once thanked for her baking reached out to offer billowing white drapes for the exhibit. A stranger from Oregon sent artwork of a bride dissolving into petals. Each offering felt like another hand reaching across the divide. I closed my eyes, thinking of tomorrow, of printing invites, securing a space at the community center, packing boxes of gowns and memories. The path ahead felt overwhelming, but for the first time since Grandma's service, I felt ready. As I drifted to sleep, I wondered, when the exhibit opens, will the world show up ready to heal? Or will they still choose judgment over understanding? Tomorrow, we'd find out. The moment I stepped through the gallery doors, my breath caught in my throat. Rows of gowns, lace, chiffon, satin hung like pale sentinels, each one threaded with a story of sorrow and hope. Handwritten notes fluttered beside them. "For my mother lost too soon. My first love gone. A farewell to yesterday." Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a soft glow on visitors who paused to read, some nodding, some wiping tears. At the center, beneath a canopy of rose-pink paper lanterns, stood Elise at a podium. She traded the wedding dress for Grandma's favorite rose-pink dress, simple, elegant, her hair pinned back with a single white rose. As I watched her speak, her voice steady yet warm, I felt a swell of pride. "Thank you all for being here," she said, scanning the crowd of old friends, strangers who'd found us online, and even Mrs. Whittaker from down the road. "This exhibit is more than dresses. It's a testament to every goodbye we've had to say and the strength we discover when we honor our grief out loud." I stood to the side, clutching a stack of envelopes embossed with our grandmother's initials. When Elise finished, I stepped forward. My legs trembled, but I found my voice. "In memory of Margaret Reynolds," I began, "we're launching the Clara and Elise Reynolds Scholarship. It's for young women navigating loss, so they can pursue their dreams even on the hardest days." I handed the first envelope to a scholarship committee member seated in the front row. May this small gift remind them they're never alone. A ripple of applause filled the hall. I looked at Elise, tears pooling in her eyes, and she gave me a gentle nod. We'd come so far, from the stones thrown at us in gossip, to this moment of collective compassion. Afterwards, guests wandered the exhibit, sharing stories, placing new notes by the gowns. A teenager pressed a handwritten card into Elise's hand. "Thank you for giving me permission to feel." I felt a lump in my throat. This was the real impact, beyond headlines and viral posts. As the sun dipped below the horizon, we stepped outside under strings of twinkling lights. The oak tree where Elise had collapsed that night was now wrapped in lanterns, casting soft patterns on the lawn. We sat on the low stone wall, shoulders touching. "I never imagined it would feel like this," Elise said quietly, "like turning our grief into something that helps others." I linked my arm through hers. "Grandma would be proud," I said. She leaned her head against my shoulder. For a long moment, we watched as families and friends lingered, some laughing softly, others lost in reflection. "This isn't the end," I whispered. "It's just the beginning." Lise lifted her head, eyes bright in the lantern glow. "What comes next?" I let the question hang in the warm night air, knowing that our story would carry on in every dress, every scholarship, every whispered confession in the quiet of someone else's mind. And as we sat there, hand in hand, I realized that healing wasn't about moving on. It was about moving forward, together, and inviting the world to follow.